Hey folks, as you may or may not know, Pandemic is my favorite board game and has been so for many years now. So I was very excited when State of Emergency, the third expansion to Pandemic, was announced, and even more excited when it came out. So, does it hold up to the admittedly very high standards of the game and the first two expansions? Let's find out. State of Emergency comes with basically 4 new modules, so 4 new ways to play the game. I'll explain each one in a moment. Besides that, we also get several new role cards. Here there's 5 as well as one revised one, the Medic. It comes with the corresponding pawns for those, which are plastic now, by the way. And it comes with 7 new events. The events and the role cards themselves are really quite excellent. I'm really fond of several of these. The Pharmacist, for example, lets you as an action reveal a card from your hand and treat disease there without discarding the card. And it has a secondary power, but that's really quite excellent. We have the Gene Splicer as well here, who has an alternate way of discovering a cure by being at a research station, matching the cure you're attempting to find, and then basically getting a rainbow of colors. So pretty useful. We have the Colonel, which I'll talk about in a second, and the First Responder there that as an action may move to any city with a research station, and immediately after an epidemic she gets to fly right out there right then and there and treat. So as soon as you flip that card from the bottom of the deck, then she can show up out of turn and deal with it. These tokens right here make up the Quarantine expansion, and it's really just 6 of these, though normally you play with only 4. You use all 6 if you're using a character that lets you use all 6, as I showed you before. The Colonel here will let you play with all 6, and he gives you a couple of beneficial powers there that are tied into those Quarantine markers. But they're really quite simple. Basically what you'll be doing is, on your turn, let's say you are sitting here in Lagos and you can, for a new action that you have, you can place one of these on the board, like so, and then next time there would be cubes placed there, they are not, and instead you flip this over, the Quarantine marker, and then it'll work one more time, where again you will prevent cubes showing up there, and then the token itself will go away. The second module, which the game calls the Hinterlands Challenge, requires you to add these 2 new boards to the game, which as you can see here include some blue, a new blue space that is connected to several blue spaces already on the board, a new yellow space also connected to several yellow spaces on the board, and then the same thing for black and red over here. And those places are marked on the board, as you can see, by those tokens, these translucent tokens, which are placed on the cities indicated here on the sides. These new spaces basically represent new locations on the map, and they are locations from which disease that emanates from animals might jump to the human population. And we have no way to get there except to travel there by going to one of these locations and then from there jumping out to the hinterlands. So how do these places, how do these spots get disease on them? Well, it's very simple. Basically, each round, before you infect cities, you are going to roll this die. The die has 2 blank sides as well as 1 face for each of the 4 hinterland spaces. So you're going to go ahead and roll that. And if I got a blank, then nothing happens, and then I go ahead and infect cities. Or if I get, say, the red there, the pigs, then I'll put a cube over there in that location, and I also then infect cities. So I would add 1 here and continue. That place starts with 1 at the beginning of the game, and once it has 3 and takes another, then it will outbreak like any regular city, and then we'll jump out to all of these spots that are marked on the board, as well as if any of these outbreak, we will put a cube in the hinterland. The next challenge is the Superbug Challenge, which is the one that requires the most moving parts. So the way it works is, you need to discover the cure for purple, and before you do so, you cannot even treat these. These will just show up on the board. If that card hits again, then you are going to, let's say, for example, that we have here in Kinshasa, yellow and purple. If the card comes out, we add a purple and a yellow. You would add both. And these will outbreak just like normal, but you cannot treat them. You cannot show up and for one action get rid of one. So what you need to do is, well, you need to slow them down with your quarantines, but besides that, you need to cure them. The way you cure them is you discard any 5 cards at a research station, but at least 2 of those 5 have to be for cities where purple currently is. So once you've done that and you discover it, then whatever research station you are at that discovered that cure, so let's say, for example, you did it, let's say you had put one there, and that's where you found the purple cure. Well, you're going to replace that one with one of these vaccine factories. And from now on, that vaccine factory will, at the end of every player's turn, make a vaccine, which you'll place there. A player can now, for one action, while in Cairo, while in that place, collect as many of these as they want to. Typically, you take a bunch of these. And then, for one action at a place that has purple, you can turn in one of these to cure all the purple. You need to eradicate them once you've found the cure. So it's quite challenging because not only do you have to find the cure to these, but then you need to travel to these locations, which you can build more of, hence there are 4, and then take it back and deal with these, so administer the vaccine. The final challenge is the emergency event challenge, and this is the simplest by far, and it just comes with these cards here, which you'll shuffle up, and you'll put as many in the player deck as you've put epidemic cards in there. You'll distribute them evenly. Here we have disease zones expand, and it says you add 1 cube of every non-matching color except purple to each city with different colored cubes. So if there's a mixture, they get hit again. Patient 0, which says you draw 1 card from the infection deck bottom. You add 1 disease cube to that color to that city every turn before infections, and this sticks around until another one gets rid of it. This one is just, it's a really cool thematic card, and it really can hit you hard if it's somewhere out of the way. So watch out for these. So that's basically it for this expansion. You shuffle some of those in, and when they come up, they smack you around. Alright, so there's a brief overview of State of Emergency. As you can see, it's one of those expansions that has several different modules, which I really like. It's actually my favorite kind of expansion, when you can mix and match which things you like, which ones you want to put in, which ones you decide are not for you. So let me do that now. Let me tell you what I think of each one, which ones I liked and which ones I was a little lukewarm on. I'll start with the Hinterlands expansion. That was probably my least favorite one out of everything in the box. I think it visually clutters up the board, having all those plastic tokens on there, and now you have to have a token with possibly cubes on there, possibly a research station, pawns, all in one city. And it's a little heavy. The idea of adding 4 new cities to the board is interesting, but I'm not sure it's worth the trouble for the return it gives you. It's an okay variant, and I would play with it sometimes, but it's not one I'm going to run out to get played every time I pull out Pandemic. It's an okay variant, somewhere in the middle when it comes to all the modules that have been released. The Superbug is pretty interesting, and it is, I think, my favorite way to play with that purple disease. We already had the purple disease challenge in the first expansion, which was on the brink, and then in the lab, the second expansion modified it a bit, and now this is yet another variant using purple. It's interesting. I like it the best out of all the purple challenges, but again, coming after those 2 challenges feels more like a sideways step than really a jump forward. So I like it more than Hinterlands, but it's okay. I enjoy it, and I definitely would pick this one over the first 2, the 12 cubes variant with the 5th disease, and then the follow-up. The little one, the small expansion, the event, is really my favorite, and I think it's It's the highlight here, at least for me. I love the expansions that add content and theme and story without adding a ton of complexity. So, having said all that, where do I rate this expansion in comparison to the other ones? I would say that you should actually buy them if you have none of them in order. I think the first one's still the best, On the Brink, and you need it in many ways for In the Lab, so I would buy that second. And this one's really, I think, for the hardcore pandemic enthusiasts. I think the roles are excellent and the events are excellent. If you are okay with paying full price, which is not cheap, this is as much as the base game, for those things and the variants sound interesting to you, then I'd say, yeah, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing that's broken. There's certainly nothing as esoteric as the Bioterrorist Challenge, which I know very few people who play with that. And that came out in the first expansion. But it's really more for the hardcore pandemic player. This is sort of a last hurrah. And I do feel like a lot of ideas that would seem to make sense, that seem like they should have been in here, are things that might have been saved for the upcoming pandemic legacy. You know, things like, hey, when are we going to get characters that power up over the game? Well, maybe Pandemic Legacy. I don't know. I don't have any insight or info on that. But when are we going to get something interesting like that? A real step forward, and not just these side steps that all these variants are. Because we're getting to the point that they're getting fiddly. That's the problem. So again, if you have everything and you really like it and these sound interesting, then by all means pick it up. I'm glad I have it. But if you're unsure, if you don't have the other two yet, I would say get those first. And this would be the very last thing you get. And as I said, it is not necessarily cheap for what you get in the box. So there you have it. Pandemic State of Emergency. I'll see you.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.